Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll learn to become a better, more business-savvy designer so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I've got my good friend Nick Gulic here to talk about sales. Stick around to get some helpful tips on how to sell by helping and not with sleaze. Nick Gulic is a business coach for web designers, and he created the Sell by Helping course, which teaches you all about this approach to selling so that you can make more money without being sleazy or slimy. And yes, it really works. Nick runs Creative Click, a Sydney, Australia-based web design agency that focuses on delivering results for growth-driven businesses. His personal website is nickgulic.com, and he can also be found on Twitter at nickgulic. Welcome to the podcast, Nick. It's great to have you here.
Hey, great to be here.
So I thought we'd start off with a couple funny questions.
Sure.
And one is location specific to you, and that's, would you rather fight a koala or a kangaroo?
Probably the koala. Kangaroos are big and strong. Like, they're actually really not as cute as TV shows make them seem. They're mean. They're a little bit scary. They look really like they work out.
I've seen memes of them with boxing gloves on.
They'll come up to you and then kick you in the chest and like claw you. So yeah, no, they're.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah, no. Small kangaroos are fine, but you kind of keep your distance. Koalas are cool. They're not aggressive. They've got chlamydia, koala chlamydia, but yeah, it's.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
But no, koalas are weak, man. I'll take a koala any day.
I thought I had seen a picture, and I don't know if it was doctored or anything, but is it true they can like stand on their tail?
Yeah, and that's how they kick. Yeah, that's how they kick you. They lean back on their tail and they kick you with their legs. That's how they fight. Yeah, you watch. You can YouTube like kangaroos fighting. Everyone's like jumping on the podcast now to go watch kangaroos fighting.
Oh my god, that's crazy. Okay, I definitely have to look that up. Okay. All right. And then on another note, what is your favorite software or app that you just cannot live without, whether it's related to business or web design?
Can't live without. Probably the browser. Like that's the one thing that I need to use no matter what. Most other apps are accessible in the browser. So with no internet, I will die. What a cop-out. What a cheap answer.
Okay, and I just want to let the listeners know that we've known each other for I think maybe 5 years now from WP Elevation originally.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know that you regularly land $10,000 to $20,000 brochure sites.
Yes.
With your agency. So that's awesome. So you're like a perfect person to be talking to about this because the sales process is like, so many creatives really dread it. I used to dread it. And they feel like with selling, it's them against the client and they have to convince them to work with them. And, but we'll get into like why sales isn't about that at all. So I thought we'd start off by talking a little bit about the mindset around sales first.
So there's like a story with all this, right? So I used to be an accountant.
You did? I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of people say like, what? You? So I used to be an accountant and, I worked in an office and I did all that stuff, did tax returns and things like that. And, would meet with clients. And then it didn't really suit me too well. Like I was good with the numbers part, but I found it so boring. So I moved into a role with an accounting firm where I was kind of going out and getting them clients. And not a lot of accounting firms did that. They mostly clients would get referred to them and they'd meet with one of the partners. And so my job was to get them clients. And, I had no idea how to get clients and how to do sales. So I'd have sales conversations and I just kind of copied the person who was doing it before me. And it didn't really work out for me. And I just went, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't care anymore. I'm just going to talk to these people. And so I'd ask them questions around what they were doing and how they were doing it. And ended up like mapping out solutions and saying, hey, this is how it could work. Like, we could do this for you. And then they would sign. And I went from they were getting like 3 to 5 clients a month. So I started getting that. Then I started getting 10 clients a month. And I was getting like 30 clients a month.
Wow.
Because pretty much everyone I spoke to and I'll do that for would sign. And so they were like, wow. And that grew into like a multi-million-dollar business. And so I started looking at it going, hang on a sec. Like, instead of me trying to convince them to give us money, instead, I'm kind of approaching it like my job is to map out a solution. I started looking into things like, it's called like solution selling. There's one called spin selling. Like, it's a book. It's pretty good. Neil Rackham.
Mm-hmm. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's old, but it's good. And so the idea is like the mindset for me was like, okay, my job is not to get them to buy. My job is to recommend a solution. Ideally, that solution is going to be me,
Right.
but you know what? Sometimes it's not, and that's also powerful. Is telling someone, hey, you know what? No, this isn't a good fit. I think this is what you need instead. And so, like, my number one mindset is it's about finding solutions for people rather than convincing them to buy. uh,
Mm-hmm.
then there's the whole like don't be desperate for the sale. Like you need to be willing to like push it away because otherwise you lose all authority and all respect when you're like recommending. Yes, you should totally give me money that you don't have,
Right.
and focusing on the things that people care about. And that's a big one because a lot of people think that hey, everything I have in my process is what that client cares about, and they don't. And so understanding, you find a solution, make sure that solution is something that they care about, and don't be too desperate to get the sale. And they're kind of the three like mindset basics. I actually cover that in my course too, actually, literally those 3 points. They're like the first module. So yeah, that's the mindset for me behind sales.
Yeah, because I think a lot of creatives, and I used to think this too, it's like you think the goal of a sales call or meeting with someone that you don't even know, they don't know anything about you. Like you might think that the goal is actually to end up with a project. And a lot of creatives will think that and then they get upset and think that anything less than that is a failure. Like, oh, I'm not good at sales because it's really their expectation was too high. They were expecting something that was it was a too high expectation and somebody didn't know them and then they're expecting them to turn around and just start working with them. And so the other thing that happens from that is that they lose confidence and it hurts their self-esteem. And then so it's like I think there's a lot of reframing. What is the goal of a sales meeting? What is the purpose of having a call with a client?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Look, you can definitely meet with someone and get a sale straight away. Like that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be outcome independent. Don't stress about the outcome itself. Worry about focus on the stuff that you can really control, like following a process and having a conversation and trying to help someone. Like selling and sales is literally a transaction. It's getting a transaction to happen. But what happens is there's multiple ways you can go around doing that. So you can take the approach of the convincing and stuff. But for a lot of people, it's not natural. And for some people, it is. And that's great. Like that's what they're made for. You could throw them into a used car lot and they could just get sales. Some people would die in that situation. And for a lot of creatives, that isn't who they are. When it just seems to be the case. Like personality of a creative is not this super outgoing, like smarmy, like sleazy type of person. Like,
Right.
no, that's not who we are. Like I might seem rather outgoing, but I am not. I am super introverted. I stay at home. Yeah, I'm at home. I don't go out. Like I don't like to go out of the house too much. I don't like big crowds of people. I get very nervous.
I'm like that too.
So like that's who I am. I just have a process, and my process is one that doesn't require me to be super outgoing and and all of that. So there's different ways you can approach sales. It's just the way I approach sales is like it works for me and it works really well, and it's working for other people that I talk to as well. So yeah.
And some of the other mindset issues and self-limiting beliefs that I hear from designers, which again I've also had in the past as well, is, oh, I can't charge more, or my clients aren't going to pay what I really want to charge. I can't find those clients, or, I need more experiences or more skills, or I need to get one more certification, or whatever it is that they think they need in order to charge more.
Sometimes that's true, but usually it's not. Like the biggest one is people don't pay that much in my area. Like I hear that all the time.
Right.
Like I hear people in the UK, like especially in the UK, it seems like every single web designer in the UK is complaining about how their clients don't want to spend money. One of my higher paying brochure sites that I'm doing, and I'm actually still working on right now, is a client in the UK. And it's like, yeah, no, like it's not. It's not that people don't pay. It's that you need to understand people pay for what they value. And
Mm-hmm.
so if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I need a website," and you're like, "Cool, what color do you want the banners?" And like start talking about stuff like that, you're an order taker, and they don't value that because you're just a commodity like everyone else.
Yes.
But if someone comes to you and says, hey, I need a website. And it's like, well, why do you need a website? What do you want to do? And you start finding out that they have this business that does $1 million a year. They want to try to double that business over the next 3 years. The website is a critical part of it. And you're like, well, so you want to basically generate $1 million more revenue with this website? And like, yeah. And it's like, cool, it's going to be $20,000. Like, what are they going to say? No, it should be $1,000. Dude, how's $1,000 going to make you $1 million? Like, that doesn't work that way.
Right.
There are people who'll do it, who'll do it for $1,000, but they're probably not, like, it's probably not going to be the best outcome. And so you need to shift away from being the same as everyone else. Like, if you want to charge more, and you don't have to, like, people don't have to do any of that. Like, if they're comfortable, and it's a big thing. Sometimes I talk about sales stuff and people get really offended.
Offended?
Because it's kind of, when you say something that's counter to what people do, they feel the need to justify their process. And it's like, it's fine. You can do that if you are happy. Like, I'm very blatantly, this is not the only way to do things. The way I do things is not the only way. It's the way I do it. It's the way that if someone comes to me and is struggling, it's what I'm going to recommend doing, because I see that it will usually work for them. And people don't have to land $10,000 sites. Like, there's one of my, like, coachees. I never know what to call it.
Mentee?
Yeah, whatever it is. I say friends. Like, I call everyone my friends. So one of my friends, he hadn't closed a site in like a year, and then he got a $5,000 brochure site, 5-page brochure site for $5,000 US. Like, that's, and he was very happy with that. And it's like, great. Like, the money is like, dollar values and things don't matter. It's what you're happy with. If you're happy making $1,000 for a website, then make $1,000 for a website. Like, that's okay. If you want to get more, if you're not happy with it, that's when you need to change something to make it happen. Yeah. So I'll say things like, hey, this is how, I do it, or this is how I recommend doing it. And then people will feel the need to justify it. So you don't have to change anything if you don't want to. But if you do, then focus on, like, moving away from being like everyone else. Don't just take orders and, like, okay, cool, let me process your order. What color here? What shape there?
Can you get fries with that?
Yeah. How many pages do you want? Like, that sort of stuff is, in my opinion, irrelevant to identifying a solution for someone. Instead, it's like, who's your audience? What are you trying to do with them? Like, how do you make money, basically? Like, how can I help you make more money? Like, that's something people almost always care about. And it isn't always, like, not all websites need to be this lead generating machine. Some people, they care about how they're being perceived. But you find out what they care about, and if you can find a solution that will help make that reality, then you're already going to stand out versus every single order taker that is out there, that people who are just like, cool, how many pages do you want? So you're already standing out there. And then, like, that's when you can start to charge more, when you're giving them something they want that other people can't give.
Right.
So that's kind of my, like, how I look at it.
Yeah, same. And it's like, when you're in the order taker position, you're not leading the conversation, and that's why you're being hired. They might come to you and say, okay, I want this color, or I want, I want this many pages, or whatever. They need to be led. They have their own ideas, but that doesn't mean that you have to just, okay, shut up and take them. It's like they're not stepping up to the McDonald's counter and just, ordering things off the menu. I mean, you're the one that needs to say, that's not a good idea, and why. Let's reframe this. Let's, talk about your actual needs and what you're trying to accomplish, and figure out if that's even where the direction you should take, So I think it's that order taker thing is like, yeah, lead the conversation and actually step up and be the expert.
Yeah. Well, imagine if you went to the doctor and said, hey, doc, prescribe me some antibiotics right now. Like, I need the antibiotics. Can you give me a prescription? They're going to tell you to get lost. Like, no way.
Well, in the United States, that actually happens. That's what the patient, because
what?
Yes, big pharma markets to consumers. They have been for years, which they didn't use. That was used to be illegal. So that actually happens in the States. That's what they.
Oh man. Well, okay. All right. So then I really need to change up my stories because I use that story a lot, right? So, yeah, wow. Okay. So in Australia, if you go to a doctor and try to tell them what to do, they're going to tell you get out of their office. Instead, like, if you go to a doctor, like an ethical doctor, you're going to go in and say, hey, I've got a headache. And then they're going to ask questions about it. They need to diagnose before they can prescribe.
Right.
And so that's, like, I kind of treat it the same way. Like, someone comes to you and says, hey, I want a website. It's because they think that is going to solve Like that's the prescription that they think they need
Right.
for the problem they have, but they're not a medical professional. They don't know, what they're like WebMD and Dr. Google is not enough to figure out what you really need.
Right.
So just because someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I need a website," doesn't mean they actually even need a website. I knock back heaps, and then sometimes they do need something, and it's that something. There's not enough value in what they want to be worth me getting involved because like I know how much I need as a minimum for it to be worth my time. So then I recommend something else. And some people just want someone to literally, I've got this vision. I need you to execute my vision. Great. Go to Fiverr or Upwork or go to any cheap freelancer because you don't need anyone expensive. You just give them the instructions and they're going to follow it. And it may or may not be the best outcome because you don't really know what you're doing. But if that's what people are looking for, that's an option too. It doesn't need to, not everyone needs to be diagnosed. Some people don't like, I mean, it'll probably help them, but some people don't want to be diagnosed. They just want to find the commodity and great. And that they're the people, again, saying you need to not be desperate for the work.
Right.
Because if you take those people on, you'll hate life because you're just going to follow instructions. There's going to be unlimited revisions. Like the revisions going to come out, out the butt,
Yeah.
and it's never ending story. And they don't want to pay for anything. So yeah, because they can get it for cheap already. So
Yeah, I mean, I had to, at some point I had to change my contracts a long time ago because I had a client who I really enjoyed working with until she did this, but she was like, "Oh, okay, so how many drafts do we get?" And I was like, "3, so you get one more." And she's like, "Oh, okay, great. So I'll find some changes to make." It's like she felt like she was going to get her money's worth only if she actually used up that other round of revisions. It's like,
yes. So I don't do rounds of revisions. I'll say unlimited.
you say unlimited?
I say unlimited, and people are like, what? How can you say unlimited? Because I know that the most revisions I get is 2, and that's very rare. And because if someone does like dramatic changes and then contradicts themselves later, I stop them and I pull back and we reframe the entire conversation back to goals. Because I'm there to hit goals. And so like not I'm not there to change colors and things. I'm there to make something happen. And so I've had that happen. I've had people not abuse the unlimited revisions, but where they kept doing revisions and they kept changing, and I literally restarted the entire project. um, it's when you charge enough, you can kind of afford to do that. Just as a heads up for everyone, like a lot of things are like, I can't afford to do that. It's because you're not charging enough,
Right.
or you've charged a really low amount based on time or something. But if something's going to take you, I don't know, like 2 weeks to do, and you've charged $10,000, and then you need to do something else that's going to add a couple of days, it's not the end of the world. Like you've got enough buffer to compensate for it, and it's also very rare for that to happen if you are really good with managing your clients during the process. But that's a whole new topic.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were talking before about, some people might be happy about like just getting $1,000 or $5,000 for a website. And it's like, I know people who have charged, 5 figures for a website, but they weren't necessarily profitable. And so I think that's a big thing too, is like, are you more profitable at a lower price point or at the higher price point? I mean, it really depends. I mean, you have to make sure you're covering all your bases.
People do like e-commerce sites. So I have a client, a long time client, and I've built like 5 websites for him, and they wanted to add e-commerce onto a site. And I quoted for me to add, it's an existing site, high performing. The conversion rate is through the roof. So I was like, look, basically extend that site with e-commerce, and gave them a quote, and oh, we've got a quote for like a third of that. And I had a look, and it turns out this person had quoted to actually build a completely new website with e-commerce. I'm like, well, actually, if I was building a new website with e-commerce, my price would have been more than double. So it's actually like 1/10 of what I would charge you. And they were like, oh, are you trying to rip us off? And it's like, well, no, I mean, I know what's involved in doing this stuff, and I know how it's performing. So I'm really curious. People like, how are they going to make money?
Right.
It was like, it ended up being something like, I think $3,000 or $4,000 to build a whole new site with e-commerce.
What?
And I'm like, that's number one, that's low for pretty much anyone you talk to.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, but when you've got a site that is like processing this much, like you don't mess around with that too much. But anyway, like there are people out there who like what you see a lot in groups is people talking about these projects they've landed and the numbers behind it, and they'll say, "Oh, I've just landed this $30,000 project," and which just sounds really impressive, and people get, "Oh man, I don't land $30,000 projects. I wish I was landing $30,000 projects." You need to see what kind of project it is, because I can tell you now, a $30,000 project that is a brochure site is highly profitable, but a $30,000 project that is e-commerce is getting slightly less. $30,000 project that's a membership site with, like, I don't know, subscriptions and all this stuff is starting to lose profitability. And sometimes
Right.
they're building a web app, and it's like, no, that should have been like more than double the price. So profit is the most important. I tend to stick to brochure sites because I know I can get them done fairly quickly and easily and deliver a really good outcome. And my strength is related to um, like outcomes related going back to like getting more clients. Generally, that area is where I play like and I perform the best. Development, like building something custom, is not what I'm interested in, and it's a hard to measure outcome for me. Versus, I can see that people are getting more clients and making more money, but like that's kind of where I want to play. So I usually won't take on anymore. I won't take on membership sites and even e-commerce. I'm a bit like, ugh, I don't really.
Yeah, I don't mess with those either. I don't want any part of that.
Yeah. I do sometimes, but only for the right kinds of clients. And again, that's going to be really high, I think. So identifying what's profitable for you is really important.
Yeah.
So just because someone has big numbers doesn't mean that they're profitable.
Exactly.
I know people who their agencies do 7 figures a year, and they make less money than I do, and less money than you do, and probably less money than most people listening, because just because turnover is big doesn't mean profit is big. You've got to just design the business for yourself and what you need. Like, don't worry about these big arbitrary number goals. Like, they're irrelevant.
Right.
Right, we're throwing some big numbers around here, like about 10,000 for a brochure site and 20,000 for this and 30,000 for that. Don't worry about that. That's like they're just numbers that we're using, like, and that we work at. It doesn't mean you need to. Like, you could be more, you could be less. Like, I've got a student. I'm going to say student, friend, person I'm coaching who is landing brochure sites twice what I charge. Like, and that's amazing, and I'm so like pumped. Like, that's how good is that? That's like,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
And so that's great. Like, I don't need to charge that much. I'm happy with what I'm charging. But he wants to charge more, and he's doing it, and it's working, and people are happy, like, which is really important. So, and his business is hugely profitable. So, you got to design the business for yourself. You can charge heaps less and still make huge profit. It's just depends on your process, and depends on how you work, and depends on what your goals are in life.
Totally agree.
So yeah, don't let other people decide your goals for you.
Right. And you never know what kind of expenses they have or where they live and what the cost of living is and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, what you were talking before about, price and value. And I think that's a great topic to cover, is the difference between price and value when we're talking to clients.
It's a huge topic, actually. Value. Price is like what you're charging, right? Value it's tricky, and like people get again, this is something that sometimes people get a little bit offended about when I say, but value, you don't decide what the value is. Like, the client decides. And whatever they decide, they're right, because they're the person who has to pay. So
Right.
you might think it's worth more, and you might think the value is like, of what you're doing is like $50,000. But if the client thinks its value is like $10, then the value is $10 for that specific client. And it's unique to everyone.
Right.
Values, it's literally perception. So in a sales call, in a sales meeting, what you're hoping to do is you're hoping to help this client raise the perceived value of what you're offering to higher than the price you're charging. Because if the value is more than the price, then they're going to pay. And it might be just a little bit more. It might need to be heaps more. It depends on them. But value it's literally just perception, and it's in the person who's buying, not the person selling. But yeah, value is not something you decide. Value is something the client decides. Your job is to help them realize the value of what they're doing, and believe a certain value figure, and raise it if you can.
Right. You can't just tell them. You can't just preach to them, hey, this is how it is.
Yeah. Sometimes it is as simple as saying like, hey, you've got a multi-million-dollar business. You're growing 20% a month. Like it's a big growth thing. Like, sorry, like you need to be paying more than that for something. Like if you're, how could you think it's okay to pay this amount for a website?
Right.
So that's, it was, and sometimes people, they determine their value based on previous experiences. Like I get that, it's like, oh, wow, that's a lot more than I expected. It's like, okay, what were you expecting? Oh, well, our last guy was blah. I'm like, cool. Your last guy didn't, like, were you happy with the results? Like, well, no. It's like, cool. So do you think if the last thing that you bought wasn't delivering, do you think that maybe you need to pay more for the next one to get results?
Right.
And they're like, oh, actually, yeah, that makes sense. Great. And sometimes that's enough. So yeah, it's definitely tricky area, but that's kind of the job of the sales meeting. So
Well, yeah, and you say in your course, budgets are BS, and so it's they've come up with this number that they may not really have any like education behind coming up with, and then they're coming to you with it, and it's like a lot of creatives feel like, oh, I've got to fit my price into that number. It's like, no, you're the expert.
yeah. Yeah, I don't ask budgets like early on. So it's actually a big point, big kind of difference area. A lot of people will have, for example, they'll have an intake form where you'll ask the budget. And I don't really ask that because what they want to pay is irrelevant to the
Right.
solution.
I stopped
Like,
asking it too for that
yeah.
reason. Right.
So like instead, I'll judge what they should be paying, in my opinion, based on their business and what their goals are and how much they're generating and how much they want to generate and stuff like that. So yeah, like the budget thing is just everyone has a perceived value. Again, like I was saying, based off the previous experiences, maybe or whatever. And they'll say, so I want to spend $2,000 on a website. And so if they put $2,000 in on a form, you're going to turn around and say, no, that's too low. And they're going to say, okay, well, I'll go talk to someone else. Or you're going to say, or you're going to try to come up with a solution that's going to fit close to $2,000. Instead, if you talk to them and go, okay, cool, what are you trying to achieve? And then you kind of unpack it for them and say, so you want to make X, you want to do this, you want to do that. And in order to do that properly, you should be spending something like this. They'll be okay. Like they'll say, okay. Like I had someone who said, oh man, my last website cost me $5,000. I cannot believe it cost me that much. It didn't really get me where I wanted to go. They ripped me off and all this stuff. And then I was like, good news, bad news. Like good news, I can live with something that's going to like get you that outcome. Bad news is going to cost you $12,000. And he was like, that's fine. And he signed straight away. It's like, cool. So people like if I asked him for a budget at the start and let that influence my conversation, I probably would not have gotten that client. So there are plenty of businesses who go in with like an actual budget that they like a solid budget, but even then, sometimes that budget isn't high enough. And like people look at that and go, oh man, it's not enough for what they want. It doesn't matter. Once they understand the value of what you're doing, that magically that budget stretches. Like
Right.
that's the big thing. Like it's like, oh, the magic budget, hey? Like it will be whatever it needs to be. Like
Right.
I don't know about you. Like I go shopping for clothes or something. Like let's say I want to buy a pair of shoes. And I'm like, oh, in my head, I'm like, $100 is pretty fair for shoes. But then I'll go and I'll find a pair of shoes that are amazing and it's like 200, and so I'll buy them.
I'm too cheap to spend that much on shoes.
Yeah, well, well, in Australia stuff is a lot more expensive. So getting shoes for under 100, sometimes it can be tricky, especially if you want like brands like Nike or Adidas or whatever for sneakers. Just an example, like in your head you might have a number and then you see the thing you want. It's like, no, I want that, and you'll pay more. Like the budget was just an arbitrary number you set based on previous experiences. So budgets aren't that important, in my opinion, anyway. And like people might disagree, and that's cool. You can disagree.
It's just like you said, it goes back to that perception of value too. And I think in the sales call, the way that you come across, not just what you say, but the way you come across, like how confident you are and how much you convey to a prospect that you are confident about being able to solve their problem. I think that goes a long way. And then they're willing to be like, okay, like what you said, like, oh, well, before I invested $5,000 and now it's going to be $12,000. It's like, well, now I feel better about what this person is going to offer me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the whole increasing the value is like, there's a million and one people who can build a website. Like building a
Right.
website isn't worth much. Sorry, people who just build websites. I just build websites too. But the if you can build a website that will deliver an outcome that's worth something to people, if that's what they care about. And so um, part of that sales meeting and part of your process is getting to understand that you can help them achieve their goal. So step one is understanding what their goal is. Like what do they
Mm-hmm.
actually want to happen. Then you need to kind of educate them on, how to make that goal reality. How you can kind of step in and do things. What sort of things generally like other people doing wrong, stuff like that. And then you can tell them this is what it's going to cost to do, and they're like, okay, like if you've done everything else right, that's usually fine. And you just kind of handle a few objections. Like it's a sales term, objection handling. It just means answering questions. So they have questions like, oh, well, what about this? Yep. Here you go. Here's how it's handled. Well, great. Like you've answered all my questions. I'm happy with the price. Like I'm happy with the, what's going to happen. Let me sign off on that. And bang, you've got yourself a client. So the process, like confidence is something that even if you're not confident naturally, it can come with time, and it comes with practice. It comes with repetition. It comes with having a process to follow.
Definitely.
And so it doesn't matter what you do, you either have a process to sell or you're going to be following your prospective client's process to buy. And personally,
Oh my God, that was 100% right there. Yes.
right? Yeah. So I prefer to follow my process because it means I can run the sales meeting in a way that allows me to unpack value, and allows me to present kind of what I'm going to do for them, assuming it makes sense to do that. It allows me to present it in a way that shows the value well. If I'm just answering their questions, if they're just asking me questions saying, can you do this? Can you do that? How much is it going to cost to do this? The odds of them seeing the value in what I do is pretty low. Like it's going to just be the value that they assign to it already.
That's just an interview.
Yeah, that's just an interview. And it's unless they're asking you questions that allow you to really demonstrate value, which isn't going to happen, like very unlikely, then you're probably not going to be able to do much. And then it becomes a price comparison.
Yes.
Most situations like that are just a price comparison. So they're like, what do I get for how much?
Right. Exactly.
So, if I'm delivering a website for 10,000 and you're delivering a website for 5,000, you're going to get that job because they're both websites. But if when they talk to me, they're like, you know what? This guy's talking about, helping us generate more leads and has a track record in generating more leads. And so that's going to be 10,000 generate leads versus your $5,000 website. Then there's a much better chance I'm going to land that $10,000 lead generating website because that's what they care about and that's what they wanted.
Oh, yeah. I've lost in my whole career in almost 25 years. I mean, I lost more jobs based on having a lower price than I did because the prospect would tell me, I would ask for feedback and they would say, well, everybody else was like in this other range and you're like over here, down here. So it came across as you weren't really sure like what all was involved. And so a lot of designers are always underpricing thinking that the clients are going to care about price. Like that's like the number one thing. Most of the time that is not the number one thing that they're pricing on unless like you said, you take it down to like it's just about the like order taking stuff and not the expertise and not the value. And they end up just pricing themselves too low to even be considered at that point.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people I talk to, and they're going over a price for a proposal, and they're like deciding on whether to increase it by like an extra couple of $100 or like an extra 1,000, and it's like, dude, add another zero. Like then start looking, oh, actually, this might be too high. Like that, an extra grand or something is rarely a thing. Like it's a lot of times it's not that big of a deal unless you are literally like going to be compared like based on the whole commodity level of it. Then yeah, of course, then being the lowest price is potentially in your favor. I The downside of being low price is that when you are low price, you get compared to people at low prices.
Right.
And so I might do the sales meeting around what they're valuing and how we're going to make it happen, all this stuff. But then if I do, at the end of all that, and I talk about my amazing process, and then I put a price tag on it, and it might be $3,000, and then they have some person they met with, like who is like local, says, "What do you want? A website? How many pages? Cool, here, $3,000." They're comparing me with them. Like
Right.
that's kind of insulting based on the process that I have. And so Like when you're getting compared with someone at that level, like yeah, you know what, you might even win it. But that's who you're playing against, like at that level. And if you're doing a proper process, and if you're really like, doing things properly, and you're proud of what you do, I don't know. I like my ego doesn't want me to be compared with those people. Like I want to be compared with the higher level people, and so I want to charge at the higher level prices because it's worth. Like my work is worth it. Like results are worth it. I've got like skill does come into it to a certain like at a certain point, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of courses out there, and there's a lot of programs and things like that where they're like, no, your skills irrelevant. You're good enough already. You know what? Sometimes you're not. Like, sorry,
Right. Sometimes you're not.
be honest with yourself around where you're at. And if you don't feel confident, sure, go out and improve your skills. It doesn't mean you can't charge a bit more than you are now. Like often we are our own harshest critic. I still am very, very hard on myself with design. I'll do a design that I despise, and then I'll show another like designer, a really good designer, who's like, wow, that's really, really good work. I'm like, really? Like that looks terrible to me. And but hey, you know what? Like maybe I'm just being really hard on myself. And so don't how do I say this in the right way? So you can usually price more. Like usually most creatives are very hard on themselves, so you can usually price more.
Right.
If you're sitting there and going, man, I deserve $20,000 plus for something and blah blah blah, but everyone's like, you're struggling to get off 1,000. Maybe you're not. I don't know. So kind of be realistic around where you're at. If you can't design, if you don't know design principles, but you're selling design, then maybe that's something you need to fix.
Yeah.
If you can deliver a result, and if you can design a website and actually improve conversion rates, that's something to believe in. If you can't, if you're like, well, I have no idea how to improve conversion rates, maybe that's a skill you need to improve on. But you do need to have some skill to charge, like especially your premium. But it doesn't mean you can't also still go down the process of problem solving, like, and recommending a solution. And it just means that maybe your prices won't be as high, and that's okay. Like you don't need to charge top dollar for everything. Like, but if you improve your skills, if you're confident in the service you deliver, then yeah, why not? Why can't you charge top dollar? Why can't you charge as much as you're comfortable with and happy with? Or like, or why don't you charge as much, like even more than you're comfortable with? Maybe be a little bit uncomfortable. That might be important to do, like to break through a mental barrier. Because a lot of times, like people are saying no, the client wouldn't pay that. It's like, who are you to tell to say what the client's going to pay? Like,
right. Don't make up their mind for them.
yeah, you're making up their mind. They haven't even looked at your proposal. They haven't I usually don't. I usually tell them prices before I get to proposals. Like I don't send a proposal and they discover the price there, because that's usually bad news.
It shouldn't be a surprise, right?
Yeah, that's when you get sticker shock and stuff, and that's not a good thing. But like, who are you to decide what the client's comfortable paying? Like they might surprise you. I've had, like, I remember when I was like early on, I had a lot of people tell me, you need to charge more, dude. That's not enough. I was like, really? Like, what? Really? So, like pricing and all that, it's just a matter of perspective. Like value is a matter of perspective. So you don't need to overcharge. Just find a price point where you feel like it's worth it. Like your work is worth that. And charge that. And if it's higher than you have been, if it's higher than clients have been accepting, then maybe you need to look at the way you run your sales meetings and fix that, and change something there to help highlight the value of what you're doing.
Well, something that I think a lot of designers do, because again, I've done this, is they feel like in a sales meeting, they feel like they have to do all the talking. And it's like, it's not about them, it's about the client. But the other thing is like, they're doing all the talking, and it's almost like they feel like they need to have a solution ready, like on the sales call, like ready to go. And it's like, you're not even at the stage where you can even start, like you're talking earlier, like we're talking about like prescribing solutions. We can't even get to that point in the sales call.
No, like, well, you need to diagnose, right? So like someone, yeah, it's hard, right? So I get it. I get what people think. They get nervous. I think it's just nerves.
Yeah.
Right. I used to do that when I'd go into meetings, and because like people position it like it's the pitch. You're pitching. And so if you're pitching, if you're going to a pitch, who does the work? You or the client? Like you do the work because you're pitching. So don't pitch. Like, and for anyone, like I know you had Blair Enns on your podcast before.
Yeah. I was just thinking about Win Without Pitching.
Yeah. So Blair Enns is amazing. Win Without Pitching is a book that, like, I recommend. I have a sales course. I recommend the book as the first. In anyone else, like, how do I improve my sales? Like, my sales process, I tell people to read that book. Like, dude, read the book. It's like, it's a book. It's like 20 something, $30. Like, get the book, read the book. It's Win Without Pitching by Blair Enns. It runs through how to actually go about the process. I don't follow everything he says,
Yeah.
but most of it. And even the stuff I don't follow, it's not because it's not true and not factual. It's just that I don't need to follow that specifically. So it's worth following that. But like, you don't go into meetings thinking that your job is to pitch. Like, that's the mindset shift I was talking about. You go into the meetings thinking like, well, I need to solve a problem for this person. So how would you solve a problem normally? Like, you need to listen first. You need to understand what's happening, understand what they're trying to do, understand what they've tried to do. Then you can start like educating them on how it all works, and then you can make a recommendation. Like, and that because you've understood, you've listened, because you've educated them on how things work, then your recommendation holds a lot more weight, because it's not like they go to speak to an SEO person and like, hey, listen, I'm trying to grow a business. SEO, do the SEO. Come on, give me money for SEO. Like that's what they're going to do. Like, that's what other people do with website stuff. Like, your competitors are doing that. Don't do that. The people who make real money don't do that.
Right.
Like, instead, it's like, don't be desperate for the sale. Like, okay, take your time, listen to the person, right? Give a recommendation. It's not like, hey, buy my stuff. It's like, hey, you know what? I recommend you'd probably benefit from this based on these reasons. If you'd like to do that, we can do that. And here's how much it's going to cost you. And then like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Like, yep, that sounds like it's going to solve my problem. I believe what you're saying. Let's do it. So yeah, like that's a big thing, I think, is people are conditioned that they're going to sales meetings and it's like a pitch and it's like convincing time. And so if you're convincing someone, like, they think you need to talk to do that. And it's like, no, like, listening, sometimes just the listening part is worth so much more. Not just because you hear what they're actually saying, but because they're getting the opportunity to talk. They're getting like the opportunity to talk about their business and what they think. And sometimes that gives them clarity as well.
Oh, totally.
Especially when you ask more questions. Like, if you start asking clarifying questions, it can take them into new areas of thinking. And so there's this like concept called the light bulb, like a light bulb moment. So, like when someone's saying something to you and things just click and it's like a light bulb goes off, like in the cartoons, like ding, idea. Those moments, like, that's what your job really is to give people those moments in sales calls. And so they start getting that and they get clarity around what they're doing, and they get clarity around, oh my God, that makes so much sense why it didn't work before. Like, that's what this person was telling me. Like, oh man, now I realize how much my old person screwed me over by not following this process, right? Stuff like that happens. And like, wow, they start learning all these things and they get this clarity. And then like, you're the one giving them those light bulbs. That's what causes sales. Like, you've taken them, like, you've brought them into new ground. Like, you've caused transformation. They've learned something. Even if they walk away with you not doing this, like not getting the job, not getting the project, they've walked away with, you've transformed something for them. You've taught them something. You've caused light bulbs going off. So they think highly of you no matter what. So I've had recommendations from people who I didn't do work for because they weren't in a position to be able to do it. Actually, one of my bigger brochure sites was from a referral from someone who I didn't do work for. So yeah, and that's great. And that's because I follow my process and I give them those light bulbs and they're like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, so it's the light bulb moments are what you're there for. And if you could do that instead of just like talking the whole time, it will make your life a lot easier and it will help you close more sales. It'll help you charge more money because you can. These people like trust and believe you and understand you know what you're talking about.
Right. So you're no longer the short order cook or the person that says like, like I said, can't you want fries with that? I mean, I've had some clients where I've just asked them like a couple of questions in the introductory call and they're like, wow, like what you're saying, it's like it made them think of like all these other things they hadn't really thought about. And they're like, I've had so many people say that was like business therapy. And that wasn't even a discovery call. That was just like just a few questions on the first call. So that was, yeah, it's really interesting how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, I'd also say that, like, when you sell by helping in this manner, you're also ending up with better clients. They're not trying to negotiate your rates, they're not trying to tell you what to do, and they actually take your advice, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. Look, that was actually one of my initial like when I first did like what is this all about? It was like, you need to sell like in order to get work. You need to get work in, right? If you're doing work, if you have an agency or if you're a freelancer, like your life is getting more work. The problem is sometimes you get clients who like don't take your advice. They want like, no, I really want to do uh blue text on a black background. And it's like, no, we're not going to do that. That's a bad, like dark blue on black background. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. That's terrible. And they're like, no, we like that's what I want. And like, I don't want those situations. I don't want clients telling me what the design should be. Like, no, like I'm the professional in this.
Right.
Like that's my job. Like, no, let me do my job. And so, if you follow this process and people see that you are the expert, they let you be the expert, and
Exactly.
that's really important, right? I like if you want to be someone who just does whatever they want, then you're not really the expert. You're the hands, like you're the like the machine, like you're the robot that does the thing. Like people don't value
Right.
the automation. People don't value the robot. People don't value the person at the end of the line. Like the value is all in the person at the start, the person who does the ideas, who does the strategy, who does like the thinking. That's where value is, and that's what people really pay money for. Like as much as they think what they're paying for is someone to design a website, um, they're not. They're paying for someone who like to come up with what the design needs to be, like to get a result.
Or something that they don't want to hear. Something they might sometimes they need to hear what they don't want to hear.
Yeah, like I actually had. I remember this. Like I got contacted by someone, and it was a startup, and I was like, already startups are a bit like iffy for me because usually they don't have a lot of money, but that's fine. Like I'll still give them advice. So I had a meeting. I was talking to them, and it's like, cool. So they're telling me about their business and like where they're at, and they don't really have any clients yet. I'm like, cool. So how are you gonna get clients? I'm like, well, isn't that what the website does? I'm like, nope. Like, what do you mean? Like, good websites get clients. I'm like, cool. They do if you've got traffic going to the site. But how are you gonna get traffic to the site? I'm like, oh, can we just run Facebook ads? I'm like, do you know how to run Facebook ads? Like, no. I'm like, so how's that going to go? Like, do you have like $5,000 or $6,000 a month to pay someone to manage and run Facebook ads for you? Because that's good ad people are expensive. Like, no, we don't really have much money at all. I'm like, so yeah, I don't, so then I just told them how to go get clients. Like, like with referrals and like through word of mouth, and like no website. Don't worry about website. You don't even have a business yet. And they were wrapped. They said they're going to come back. They never do at that level, like when they're that small. But yeah, that that's I could have tried to like sell them a website, and they would have paid maybe something small. But like, why would I do that? That's not the right solution for them. So like, I think the whole that whole sell by helping concept. The core part is helping, right? Like you're trying to help people. So if you can guide them to the right solution for them, you're doing a good thing, right? And when your focus is doing that, like you take a lot of pressure off. Like there's a lot of pressure going into a sales call is a lot of pressure.
Right.
Like, and so if you're like, you know what, it's not a sales call. It's like I'm just trying to figure out what these people need. Like automatically, you're relieving a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Like you're helping people. Like you're doing the right thing. It's not as much pressure. You're not that focused on like I need to get a sale. Like oh my god,
Right.
like you're not desperate. You're not coming across, and desperation comes across in the meeting too. Like
They smell blood in the water, like sharks smell blood in the water, right?
yeah, I can tell when I'm talking to someone who needs the sale. Like when I'm talking to someone who needs the sale, like, and I know that I can get favorable terms by pushing back a little bit. And you know what? Sometimes I will, like, depending on what it is. And if I feel like they're trying to overcharge or something, then yeah, I definitely will. And hey, price is based on perception, right? So I might think that they're trying to overcharge and they might be losing money. So that's what happens. So you need to take that pressure off. So focus on helping. Like you do the right thing, guide them to the right solution. And the people that you do recommend solutions for that involve you, they're going to look at you very differently, and you're going to have a lot more authority in that relationship. And so that will help you, like you were saying, like it helps you do the work you really want to do and have less pushback on stuff from them, and charge more. Like Like how many people like, oh, none of my clients want to pay that much, but like, what are you doing in that process? Are they coming to you saying, I want a new brochure, and it's like, okay, like, how big, what colors, what do you want to say? All right, here you go. And it's like, yeah, they're not going to pay that much for it because it's not worth that much. You've just done what they asked for. Anyone can do that.
You just ordered like a double quarter pounder with cheese.
Yep, that's it. Like, yeah, like you've just gone and given them a burger like that they asked for. Like that's not, But if instead they're like, hey, you know what? I'm hungry. What do you recommend? Like, well, you know what? Like, what do you like normally? And you start asking questions and you make a recommendation. They look at you differently. Like, food. You've made a recommendation. Like, someone who works at McDonald's, do they know food? I don't know. They might, but I'm not gonna go and ask them for like eating advice, like what I should eat.
No.
But like, so you don't want to be the McDonald's worker. You want to be the person who like recommends what they should eat, because then like you're seen as someone who knows what they're talking about.
The
Yeah.
nutritionist, the gourmet chef.
The gourmet chef, like the nutritionist, I don't know, they might recommend things I don't like, so I'll go for the gourmet chef. Give me something tasty, dude.
All right, so your course. Let's talk about your course. And I know you give a presentation at the agency transformation conference.
Yeah, that was a year ago. That triggered all this actually. So
Yeah, I know. So that triggered all this, and you got great response to that. It was amazing. So, and I know how many people have said how many amazing results they got just from implementing your advice just from that one talk. And so now you have a course on it. So let's talk about your course and how you
So
can help.
basically, the whole presentation was like a last minute. Hey Nick, can you speak at this event? Like, I'm like, what topic? And like, I don't know, whatever you know. I'm like, the only thing I really think I know is kind of sales. They're like, cool, yeah, present on that. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I just did a presentation about like how I structure my sales meetings. So it's like my framework for a sales meeting, because it is process. 100% process is everything. And so I just ran through my process and I explained like how it works and why it works. And everyone was like, this is amazing, this is so good. And I had a lot of people say you should do a course. And I still wasn't going to. And then I had one person like send me a video saying after the presentation, the next sales meeting I had, I closed it in the meeting. It was $9,000. It was a brochure site for $9,000. That was a good amount. I hadn't closed many deals before that for a while. I was getting a little bit nervous. And normally I don't close in one meeting. Like normally it takes a couple meetings before I'm at the stage of doing a proposal. So I was like, you know what, that's really inspiring. A lot of people messaged said they were really inspired by it. So yeah, it's been good. The course itself is basically how I structure sales meetings, like the mindset, then the stages of the meeting. And there's a couple of little like bonus things, like like if you're a web person, like how to sell care plans. And there's more stuff that I just add kind of as I go. So there's going to be some meeting checklists coming soon, as soon as I finish doing them. And other couple of things.
Because the mindset stuff is so important, because it's like, I remember Blair Enns saying this about his courses is like, or his annual event or whatever it is. Like, you can teach somebody to sell, but if they're not in the right mindset, they can't just go and implement it and have it work. Like, mindset is everything.
Yeah. Mindset is kind of the entire thing of my approach. Like, my approach is like the mindset is my approach. Everything else is just like the steps I go through, but the mindset is the approach. And so I had people like, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging or anything, right? Like I'm really wary of that sort of stuff. But I've had people message me and say like, lesson 2 on value, like holy crap, that changed everything for me. Like I've had messages like that, and like people who've just done the first module and then gone and closed better deals. And it's like, man, this is great to hear. So yeah, I there's things that I have in my processes that other people don't always have. So and the mindset is one thing. That whole approach is one thing that I don't see a lot of people talking about with sales.
Right.
They talk about like, being like a solution focused or whatever to a certain point. But I think the whole helping is kind of really important. And I would really like it if, something that I'm doing is causing positive change in an industry or in the world, if possible. So if I have more people, let's say doing my course or like listening to something I'm saying and then going out and, not engaging in unethical marketing practices, if they're focusing on helping people rather than just like getting to give them money, Like that's a positive change for me. And the side benefit of people doing that is they can usually charge more. They can close deals better and work with better quality clients. So it's kind of like a win-win for everyone. I think I've got a coupon set up for your people.
Yes, Creative Boost, all one word.
I think it's like 20% off. Like it's like $100 off at the moment for that. And so any coupon things will apply on top of that. But that will probably end, I don't know, at some point this year.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, Nick. This has been so helpful.
No, it's been a pleasure to be on. It's good to actually finally talk in in virtual person as well.
Right, it is. All right, thank you. Are you looking to gain confidence, clarity, and a competitive edge in a crowded marketplace? I offer mentoring, resources, digital products, and courses, including accessibility for designers and web developers, that will empower you to be the design hero, not another order taker. Find them at creative-boost.com and come and connect with me and other design dominators in the Design Domination Facebook group.